Character of even a child is known by how he acts. Uh-oh. Did you hear that? The character of a child is known by how he acts. Oh, there's a lesson for the adult children, too. When life is hell, when you're going through hard times, that's the test of your character. That's the test of your faith. Okay? How you behave in your worst moment is the best you. In our storms and in our hard times, we have to praise. We have to. That's our weapon. That's how we get through it. When you have nothing in your cupboard and someone comes to your door hungry, you feed them. Same thing in every aspect. When it's opposite of what the world says, it's opposite of what the world thinks. Where you are lacking or suffering or in trial, that's where you're going to give the most. Okay? All right. So even the character of a child is known by how he acts, whether his deeds are pure and right. His ways are not our ways. So it's not the world's ways. So we're going to be different. We talked about that one, huh? Being different. Didn't we talk about that? Being different? Okay. So who did I talk about last week, children's? Yes, Abram. Who said Abram? Yeah, not Abraham, huh? Abram. That's right. He's still not Abraham. He's still Abram. Good one. Okay. And God told him to leave, right? And his father and his nephew and his wife, they left Ur. They went up to Haran. They stayed there. And then God told him, leave your father, leave your family, leave your possessions, leave your religion, leave your way of life, leave everything you know at 75 and go where I tell you to go, right? Okay, so we know that Abram eventually, God calls him his friend, right? And he abides. We know Abram abides. But let's read a little bit about him. You think Abram's perfect? No. He's always right, right? He always does the right thing, doesn't he? Oh. So if you want to know where the story comes from so you can read it for yourself later, it's in Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 13. That's where we're going to be. So Abram came, and remember last week I read this verse and I said, when Abram was 75 years old, he left Haran, right? Way up there. And he took Sarah and his brother's son Lot and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as all the people they had acquired. Did you get that? They acquired people. How do you acquire people? They bought servants. You mean people can own people? We don't do that today, okay? It's not part of our. Today we hire people, same kind of thing. I mean, if you want to compare them, we hire electricians, we hire plumbers, we hire gardeners, we hire pool people, we hire, who do we hire? A mechanic, right? We hire people to do things, all right? Or some of us do and some of us don't. Go and have our hair cut. Or, you pay somebody to cut your, right? So you're hiring someone, okay? So basically here, though, when they had a servant, they basically hired him for life, okay? Does that make sense? And remember I read that God said to Abram, I will bless those who bless you. And I will curse those who curse you. Is that what he said? And he said to your descendants, to your seed, right? I will give this land. What land?
Israel.
Israel. Just Israel today? Or more land? A lot more. A lot more. Part of modern day Syria, part of modern day Lebanon, part of modern day Egypt. Yep. Part of modern day Jordan. Okay?
West Bank.
All of what we call the West Bank, which isn't West. It's East.
Gaza.
Okay? All right. And he went to a place called Shechem. And Shechem's in the middle. This is a picture of Shechem from the Jordan River facing west. So if you keep going between those two, see where those two mountains are down there, that little valley? If you keep going, you'll go right into the Mediterranean. Okay? This is north of Jerusalem. So it's between Galilee and Jerusalem. And then he built an altar to God. What does it mean to build an altar? Is that where he gives gifts to God? He gives back to God what God already gave him? That's an altar. He acknowledges who his God is. He makes a statement. This is the altar for God. And he gives him a sacrifice on it, a gift. Okay? And then he goes to Bethel, which is way south. Okay? Way south. And he pitches his tent there. And he built an altar there. And then he goes into what's called the Negev. Negev is this part, way down here, right? The deserty part. Okay? And if you go to the Negev, let me see, which way am I? Over here would be Egypt. All right? Well, in the Negev, he discovers that there's a famine. So he wants to go to Egypt. It sounds like other stories we're going to read about. A famine in the land, and they go to Egypt on more than one occasion. Okay. And when they get down into Egypt, all of a sudden, Abram says to Sarai, tell him you're my sister. Tell him you're my... Did Abram lie?
Yes, he did.
He did?
To save himself.
Really? He says, here now, I know that you're a good-looking woman. How old was she? Hint, she's older than I am right now. You're a good-looking woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they'll say, this is his wife, and they'll kill me but keep you alive. There's this funny thing about trust and faith. You have to exercise it, and it has to grow. And sometimes you fail for it to grow and for you to learn. Did God promise Abram that he was going to give him all that land? So he goes down into Egypt, and apparently he forgets that God promised him to give him a land, right? Okay, so several things. There's a whole bunch of things you can take away from this. Either he wasn't supposed to go to Egypt, there was a famine, so there was no food. So he either didn't trust that God was going to give him food, or maybe he could have gone, but he didn't trust that God was going to keep him alive because his wife was so beautiful that they were going to kill him. But God promised him a land, right? Either way you look at it, he lacked a little bit of trust and faith, right? A little bit of belief. And yet, he's still God's chosen, and he's a man of great faith. Can you be both? Yeah, you can. You can have great faith here and miss it here. I trust him everywhere, but oh man, I want to hold on. I'm holding on to this one. This is mine. Huh? Yeah, holding on to the quarter. Right? Not letting go. Holding on to that quarter. So you can, and you got to exercise it. So I think this was a great test for Abram to test his faith. Did God really mean what he said? Do you really trust him? There's another lesson to learn here. Did Abram ask God, can I go down to Egypt, or should I go down to Egypt? He didn't, did he? Not that we know of. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. God's not going to tell you, turn left, turn... Well, he might tell you turn left, and he might tell you turn right. I've had him tell me that before. But he's not necessarily going to tell you what to do every moment of every day. If so, you'd be a robot. He doesn't want robots. He wants you to learn his word and then walk the best way you can. Does that sound about right to all of us older ones? We've had to make our own decisions, haven't we? And we have to try and make them the best that we know what is right according to Scripture. But he's not necessarily always going to tell us yes or no. Okay? Sometimes he will. Sometimes he will, because sometimes he wants us to do some very specific things. But, am I going to make whole wheat bread today or white flour bread today? He's like, make bread. How about, Should I make sourdough or sweet? Make bread. He's not telling me which bread, just make bread. Okay? So it's the same kind of thing with Abraham. He's not, or Abram, excuse me. He's not telling him, do this, do this, do this, and Abram's a robot and he does it. Abraham has his own decisions to make, okay? So do you. You got to do it according to here, okay? But I want to read a little bit because there's always consequences. And even good people make bad decisions. Is that true? Do you hear the adults? They're saying, Even good people, even old people, older people, make bad choices sometimes. We do. Yes, we do. And there's consequences, okay? But if I blow it and I make the wrong decision, then God says, I'm done with you. I can't use you. I'm going to find somebody else. Is that right? Nope. Okay, let's read. All right, let's see. So when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians did notice that the woman was very beautiful. And Pharaoh's princes, that's the prince, multiple, saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. So the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he treated Abram really well. Wait a minute. He's getting blessed for his life. He gave him, for her sake, for Sarah's sake, he gave him sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys. Get this one, male and female slaves. Hold on to that thought. And camels. Wow. She must have been really pretty. Because Abram got paid a lot for her. What? Yeah, he did. He got paid a lot for his sister. Was she really his sister? Yeah, she was. But she was also his wife. She was his half sister. We don't do that anymore. Times of the after the giving of the law, and because our genetics, the further we get away from Adam, the more we fall apart. And so you don't marry close relations, families. Okay? We don't do that. Okay? Back here, that wasn't the case. Okay? All right? Make sense?
Otherwise, your kids will turn out looking like this.
He wants us to be different, not that different. Okay. All right. Not that different. So but Adonai inflicted great plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And then Pharaoh called Abram. I wonder how he knew it was because of Sarai. It's the first time, right? So how in the world did Pharaoh know that it was because of Sarai? We don't know. We don't have all the details. Okay? But he figures it out. And he goes and he says to Abram, why did you do this to me? What have you done? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? And he says something like, well, we don't know because there's no answer. Is there an answer? He doesn't answer. So Pharaoh's the one making all the comments, and he says, here, take your wife and go. You know what's very interesting at the beginning of chapter 12 in Genesis? He says, go. Lech lecha. Go. Get going. Go already. That's what God says. And then here's Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, which is like the king of the world, because Egypt represents the world, right? And he's saying to Abram, Lech lecha. Go. Get out of here already. See, God is telling you not to be part of the world, to leave the world behind. And the world is going, you're kind of odd. Why? Because you follow God. We don't want you either. So the moral of this lesson is don't go to the world, don't be part of the world. Lech lecha. Okay? Be different. Be peculiar. Be set apart. Okay? So do you think this is a valuable lesson that Abram learned? I'm kind of glad that his boo-boos and his mistakes were written here. Because if they weren't, how would we learn? If he was perfect, what kind of hope do I have? Right? I'm really glad that all their faults and their errors and their mistakes were written, so that we could learn how they grew, even at 75 and 65, right? Are you too old to learn? Are you too old to learn? No? No? Anybody too old to learn in here? No? No? Okay? So, we're in the world, right? We live in the world. But don't do what the world does. Be different. Be set apart. Okay? Be peculiar. Sound good? Okay. All right. That's it. It's a short one today for Abram. But you got to remember this week's lesson, because next week I'm going to tell you more about Abram. Okay? And it has to do with him going into Egypt. Okay? All right. There's a lot of stories about Abram, and there's a lot of things we can learn about him. And one is his great faith, even though he was tested here and he kind of failed. But you know what? If you learn from it, it's not a total failure. Okay? Does that make sense? Zim, did we try a recipe this week? Did it fail? Did we learn something? Yeah. So it wasn't a total failure, was it? Yeah, it took a lot of time and effort and resources, and it just wasn't quite right. But we learned. Okay? You got to learn.